And a fine morning it is. Pretty soon, just a few more minutes. Jim here will be the humbug. Just a few more minutes, and Dennis will breathe a big sigh of relief. But first, you got to get through me and a history. We'll start. I'm going to start with about a 45-minute talk on the history of asphalt. But actually, we'll go back to Noah, who really was the first. No, we'll start with a brief history of Route 66, and then I'll say a few words about what I have been told by Duke Dotson Jr., who's right over here, and now a brother in the order, as of yesterday morning, Satisfactory.
Satisfactory.
And then we'll ask Duke to say a few words as well, as he was here. He was part of this whole thing. We've been placking areas along Route 66 for some time now. We've got several plaques right over here in Amboy. We've got a plaque in Chambliss. And as you go down the road towards, in the area of the Essex and Fenner roads, what do you call them, rest areas on Interstate 40, there's some plaques there as well. This is, of course, is our latest one. And I have to admit, although I've driven up and down 66 a lot, and I've taken notice of the Roadrunner sign and the remains of the gas station and restaurant here, I really never paid it much notice. So when Dennis said, hey, you know, I'd like to really plaque the Roadrunner retreat, I said, well, you know, all that's really there is an old sign. Well, I was wrong. I got into this and got to interview and talk with Duke Jr. over here, as well as Ryan, and find out the history behind this place and what a fascinating place it really was. It just goes to show you never know. And as clampers, you know, we plaque history, but we also plaque those historical items that oftentimes are forgotten about. And this is one of those places that really should not be forgotten. And now it won't be, because we, really Holcomb guys, have established this monument here.
Yeah.
So thanks to the erection crew. Way back, believe it or not, through this harsh desert, there was communication, there was travel between the Colorado River and the coast of California by the Native Americans. Mojave Indians used the route that we now know as the Mojave Road, which is about maybe 20, 30 miles to the north of it here. A series of water springs and water sources about a day's walk apart, starting with what we call Paiute Springs after the Colorado River, and then Rock Springs, Marl Springs, Zysix, and finally you hit the Mojave River at this end of Afton Canyon. It made sense then that when Americans started to come through, they would use the same route as the Indians did, because they knew what they were doing. They had been using that route for centuries. Later, a wagon road was established along that route, and of course we've, as the Vituscan missionaries, we've gone through and run the Mojave Road, but that was too rough for railroads, and we needed a railroad coming in to California, in the southern part of California. You already had the Transcontinental Railroad, which, by the way, ex-PBCs, 1869 is when it was completed.
Thank you.
Well, nobody seemed to be able to answer that question yesterday.
We know it now.
We know it now. But some years later, in 1883, the combination of the Southern Pacific and the Santa Fe created the railroad that you see just to the south of us now. And now you have rail transportation, and you don't need those water stops because you're not making the trip by wagon and by foot anymore, and you can haul water to these spots out here in the desert. And so water stops were created at different intervals. Remember, this is the late 19th century, so you have steam locomotives, you got to have water. Water came from Newberry Springs. There's plentiful water in Newberry Springs, and you could bring it out here in tank cars and place it at different areas. Well, those areas that were water stops eventually became small communities. You have, of course, Amboy up here, up the road. From Amboy east, those towns, those communities are named alphabetically, all the way down almost to Needles. And so now you have a route that's well supplied with water. The grade is pretty easy because the train can't do more than about a 2% grade. If there's a bunch of railroaders in the PVC,
they don't know shit.
Okay. And so you have a relatively easy route. I say relatively because you have desert sun in the summertime, you have desert cold in the wintertime, and you got a whole heck of a lot of sand. So when the first automobiles started to come through in the first part of the 20th century, they had a route to follow. So they followed the railroad. They followed the railroad up from Needles up to Goffs, and then followed it all down this route finally to Barstow, and finally over the hill down into San Bernardino. So you have some sort of a route. You had water at regular intervals. If you were in dire straits, you could literally, in those days, flag down a train. They were going slow enough that they could stop and help you if things were really, really bad. Or at least they could send help. Well, by the late 1910s, you finally have more and more automobile traffic coming through the area. And the auto club started to sign the different, this route through the desert. And even a little later came up with a name for it, the National Trails Highway. National Trails Highway at first was all sand, just rutted, mostly just a rutted route from Needles to Barstow, and then to the end of the upper end of the Cajon Pass where you hit concrete pavement. After a time, the road department took responsibility for the maintenance of the National Trails Highway. They attempted to oil it. That didn't really work because when you spray oil on the sand and the wind blows, it just blows the oil and the sand away together. What they eventually were able to do was scrape down enough with Fresno scrapers, either drawn by mule or drawn by tractor, that you could get down to some solid base and then oil that. That seemed to work somewhat well. And then later they started to pave, but the road wasn't completely paved until the early 1930s. In 1924, the federal government started the U.S. highway system because anywhere you went in any state, all the highways had different numbers. So if you crossed from, say, Arizona into California, you might have one number for a highway there in Arizona, then the number would change when you crossed the border. It was a real mess. So they created the U.S. highway system to unify and sort out highway numbering. Originally, the highway, when this route, the National Trails Highway, was chosen as the route into Southern California, it was originally going to be Highway 60, but later it was changed to Highway 66. Highway 60 became what's now Interstate 10 to the south of us. So now in 1926, you officially have Route 66 open from Chicago to Santa Monica.
Boom.
Yeah. Whoa. How about that? But the section through the desert was still largely unpaved, and so you still had trouble areas, especially coming up from Needles to Goffs. That's a heck of a steep hill through a lot of sand. And it wasn't long before people figured out, especially in the summertime, that the time to travel through this section from Needles to Barstow was at night. So you left Needles in the evening, and you traveled all night long, and you got as close as you could to Barstow, and hopefully you made it there before the sun came up, or at least before it got too hot. But you did have water from the railroad. You did have, these communities were starting to get formed as well. Next comes the Great Depression. By the Great Depression, by the time the Great Depression really got rolling and was in its worst phases around 1933, by that time the highway was paved. But now you have a lot of traffic, a great deal of traffic coming from the Great Plains. You know, of course, because you all went to school somewhere, I think. Well, I don't know. Yesterday's history questions from Sid. I don't know if some of you PVCs actually went to school or not.
The Dust Bowl.
Yeah. So you have the Dust Bowl. You have a combination of poor farming techniques. You have drought, and you have heavy winds blowing down the plains, created the Dust Bowl. Put a lot of these farmers off their farms. They had to sell or have their farms auctioned off. They've got nowhere to go except for what seems to be the promised land of California. And so what do? Well, you load up everything that you can into your family car. It might be a Model T or an old Chevy. It could be an old pick-em-up truck, an old Dodge or something like that, as much as you possibly could. Anything that you couldn't pack up, you sold. Anything that you couldn't sell, you just left behind. And you abandoned ship, essentially, in places like Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kansas, Nebraska, eastern Colorado. all of those places. Now, some of those people, of course, came through to California from the north, but a great many came right through here on Route 66. And they faced the same problems, if not more problems, than the folks that were coming out here in the 20s. Because those people in the 20s, at least they had some money. By the Great Depression, nobody's got any money, and you are basically counting out pennies to make sure that you can get to the next stop, get to the next stop, get to the next stop. You've probably all seen The Grapes of Wrath, and you know the story. The chapter itself in the book is called The Mother Road. This is where the Mother Road, the name the Mother Road comes from, is John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. And you have people whose cars are breaking down, they can't get any further. Some of the people are dying, so every so often you might have seen a grave along Route 66 as people are heading to California. At Needles, there was what we would now call an agricultural inspection station, and the sheriffs and local police, while they could not keep people out of California, people were highly discouraged from coming into California, because by that time, although flyers were sent back to the east advertising jobs in sunny California, plenty of work and all that, it wasn't true. Some of the farmer owners were doing here was just trying to get more cheap labor, to get rid of the fellows who are getting maybe $2 a day for picking cherries or picking peaches or whatever, and replace them with workers that would work for $1 a day or 50 cents a day. Because obviously, you know, if you have a surplus of labor, you don't have to charge so much. You don't have to pay so much. And so those travelers came right through here. A lot of their vehicles broke down. You would maybe get a tow or a push or something to get into Amboy or into Chambliss, where maybe somebody could fix your car for you. And if you couldn't, you would have to abandon your car because you have no other way of moving on. You can't stay with your car. Well, those cars would become parts for other cars that broke down. So if your Model A broke down in Chambliss, you couldn't pay to have it fixed, and you had to hitchhike into Los Angeles or wherever, or Bakersfield or whatever, your car now becomes parts for the next guy's Model A that breaks down. And so you had these parts cars all over in these various areas. Fortunately, of course, the Great Depression came to an end. World War II begins. And you have another era of Route 66 travel. You have the military on Route 66. And the surplus labor, at least for the younger men in California and other parts of the country, they're going to get drafted, and new industries will open up in Southern California, well, in all of California, related to defense. It wouldn't be aerospace industry then, but the airplane industries, shipbuilding in places like San Pedro and Long Beach and San Diego, San Francisco, men moving from either by rail or by truck from military bases inland to the coast so they can be shipped out maybe toward the Pacific. And you have a whole different type of traffic here. Gasoline was rationed, so it wasn't like you could just, oh, we got plenty of money, let's jump in our cars and take a ride. You only had so much gasoline, so most of the vehicles that you would see on Route 66 would be related to the military. Convoys, men who are to report, say, to El Segundo, to the aircraft plant there, and they're driving in from Kansas City, so they're allowed to pass through and so on. Well, now you have these communities are set up here, and they're able to make a little bit of money from the military traffic coming through. Those convoys got to stop, they got to gas up. The soldiers that are in there need a soda or a water or something to eat, and you have more and more restaurants opening up. Finally, you get to the next phase. That's after. This is what I call or many people call the golden era of Route 66, and that's the war is over. People have jobs. Guys are coming back from the service. They got money in their pockets. The airplane industry, which would soon become the aerospace industry in California, is starting to boom. Construction is starting to boom in Southern California, and people start moving west. And people start moving west in what I call in a little history, some pretty high horsepower iron. A big Packard from 1947 with a big straight 8 motor, or an Oldsmobile, or a little bit later on you get into Chevys or a Chrysler Imperial with a 331 Hemi in it, or something like that. Stuff that can go fast and carry you wherever you want to go. Gas is cheap, people got money, and people need places to stop. Again, these restaurants like Roy's down the road here, place, or here in Chambliss, Essex, everybody had a roadside attraction, a restaurant, a gas station, the world's biggest ball of string, whatever it happened to be, for you to stop and look at and get a cold soda and then keep moving on down the road. And unfortunately, though, with more horsepower comes more speed, and more speed means more accidents, more wrecks. And you have just a 2-lane highway here. So by the mid-50s, there's thoughts going up. The wheels are turning in Washington about replacing little highways like this, not little in terms of length, but in breadth and width, with the interstate highway system. That's going to come in a minute or two. And so you also have folks that are interested in opening up more garages and providing tows for people. Well, right here at this spot, and Duke, you're going to have to correct me on the name here. A fella named was it Tull? Is that? Yeah, Tull, right? Yeah. Mr. Tull and his wife decided, you know what, this would be a good spot to open up a truck stop. Tull was a trucker anyway, and he knew the need for heavy-duty towing and a garage and that kind of thing. Figured out this would be a good spot for that. This is 1962. Well, while Tull and his wife built the garage and built the restaurant that was here, and there's an indication that they actually had it running for a little while, even when it was under construction. Now we come to Mr. Duke Dotson Sr., right? Your dad, who, as I remember from our chat while we were sitting at, what was that, Coco's? Where we met, and up in, yeah, Corky's, at Corky's. This was a little side thing here. Dennis, asked me to do the history and to work on the plaque. And he said, yeah, I've got Duke Dotson Jr., who grew up out there, and he wants to meet us, and we're going to go to Corky's in, is that Upland that we were? Rancho Cucamonga. Can you meet us there? I said, oh yeah, sure, it's a chapter buying breakfast. I'll be anywhere at the chapter buying breakfast. But I had a great opportunity to talk to both Duke and Ryan over here, who's the property owner, and just got very, very fascinating insights as to how this all works. And I'm going to tell this, and Duke, if I make any mistakes, you pipe up and tell me. But as I recollect that your dad owned a Western wear shop down in Upland, Montclair. I ain't from around here. In Montclair, and was out at somewhere around Yermo talking to somebody at a restaurant garage and said, I'd like to get into this business of having do you know anything like this that's for sale? And the fellow said, yeah, I think there's a place out on Route 66 to the east of Amboy where the guy's selling it. Is that right so far? Right. And Duke's dad said, you know what, that sounds like the thing to do. So he negotiated, got this place, the restaurant, the gas station, went back home, told the wife, right, hey, guess what we're going to do, honey? So Duke here was in the 6th grade, and Dad came out here, started the business going, and as I recall, your mom closed up the shop back there in Montclair, and then you were allowed to finish the 6th grade, and then you came out here too with your sister and a brother?
Right on it.
All right, look at that. That ain't so bad. And I teach high school. Usually my brain's really scrambled. And so out come the Dotsons. And if you notice on your history and on your badge and on the monument here, you'll see the D here. That's the D for Dotson. Some people were wondering about this. Is that some sort of a copyright thing or something? No, that's the D for Duke Dotson. And when you look through the history, you can see some of the pictures of the gas station when it was operating. You'll see that as well. You see that there, and you'll see that it was up on the sign behind us, or behind me, in front of you as well. Business was booming. They had a tow service going. A guy named John Glenn from Texas came out, and Duke's dad and this fellow John Glenn built here, right here, tow trucks, several tow trucks. One was called Papa Bear, one was called King of the Road, one was called Mama Bear, there was another one called Grizzly Bear. Was there another one? That's about it. 5 of them total. I don't remember how many I just named off, but it was pretty close to 5. And so they have the Auto Club towing contract for this area. So if you broke down, you know, out by, I don't know, Danby or something like that. They tell you here. And then they said they could fix anything. And apparently they did. Now, Duke here says that when he finished the 6th grade, he came here, Dad gave him an apron, told him to start bussing tables. And if I'm not mistaken, that was the restaurant right there. Is that right? And of course, that's going to be the service station over there. And then Duke got to go to school at Amboy. How many people in the 8th grade class? 2. You're 50% of the 8th grade class. Must have been.
I was 7th grader, there's me.
Oh, fortunately somebody moved in for the 8th grade. That way they could have a dance. It was a girl, right?
No girl.
And so then afterwards, Needles High School, right? Which you had to be bused to Needles High School, I would imagine. That must have been an all-day excursion.
5 to 5.
Yeah, 5 a.m., pick up the bus, 5 p.m., get dropped off. So that's a long day for a kid. I work with kids that start at 8 and end at 2:20, and they can barely make it through that. So.
Worthless.
It speaks to your toughness. In the meantime, so this was a good going business at the restaurant. One of the interesting things that Duke told me was this, is how do you get employees? How do you get guys to come out here and work and be a mechanic and be a tow truck driver or a cook in the restaurant or whatever? And he said, well, people would call, usually a husband and wife team would call and say, hey, have you got any openings? Have you got any jobs? And they may be in Arizona, and they'll say, we're going to be passing through your area in about 2 weeks. If you've got any openings, we'll come and help you for a few weeks. So you had these itinerant people, travelers that would just go up and down Route 66, I would imagine other highways as well, that would just go from place to place, stop, work for a while at the garage. Maybe the man would work in the garage or at the gas station, or maybe as a cook. Wife would work as a waitress or the cashier. And then after a couple of weeks, they would move on and maybe head down towards Ludlow or something like that and do the same thing. And then you had places in the back here with trailers and that sort of thing where people could stay. Is that right? One of whom was the Justice of the Peace had his office or court, whatever you want to call it, down in Danby, but he would stay here because he didn't want people coming to him in the middle of the night, knocking on the door with issues, problems, wanting to pay a ticket or whatever. And so he had a cabin here that he paid $35 a month. Is that what you told me yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
Good rent, $35 a month. Well, as all things do, all good things come to an end, including this talk, and you're probably saying thank God. But that interstate highway system I mentioned that Washington was thinking about in the 50s came to fruition in the late 50s, 60s. And by 1972, you have the construction of Interstate 40, which of course you can see just up there. Don't look, it's really there. He's looking. Interstate 40, which cuts off this whole section from Ludlow all the way back over to Fenner, all this whole southern section. And when that opened in 1972, I've heard it described as it was like somebody turned off a faucet. One day, Duke told me that one day you just had the highway was packed with people going back and forth, plenty of people in the restaurant. The next day after it was open, there was nobody here. I think you told me you served one guy.
Yeah, the railroad worker from Katie's had a cup of coffee.
Yeah, one guy. The next day, one guy. And of course, that's no way, you're not going to make any money with a business like that. So the Dotsons sold the business and sold the property to Ryan's family. Is that right? Is that to the Murphys, right? And so it goes from the Dotsons to the Murphys. And Ryan is, where do you go? Oh, there he is. Ryan's here with his wife and kids. And his dad, your dad bought the property, as I recall, right? Grandfather, right, your grandfather bought the property. It's just kind of a place to come and relax and get away from it all and be in the desert. And so you spent a lot of time here as well, shooting rabbits maybe or whatever it is that she's doing. And now it's come to you, and it is Ryan who was kind enough to allow us to use the property, and hopefully we can help him through the use of our plaque and some other stuff to get him onto an historic register so that you can get more funding to fix the sign and do other things around here.
It'll come back.
Yeah, there you go. And so we're very thankful to the Murphys and to Duke Jr., to the Murphys to allow us to have our doings here, and for Duke for the wealth of information that he provided. And there you have it.
Yeah, good job, Paul.
All right, Paul. Thank you, Paul.
Did you